From the world's most respected MMO news site, Massively Overpowered, comes a programme that pits one MMO against another in a battle of wits. To the death. Welcome to Massively Opinionated. Media personalities from all over the internet come to this forum to face off in the ultimate debate. Everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion, but ours is the only one that matters. Having heard that someone was wrong on the internet, it's your host, Larry Everett!
Hey everybody, this is Larry Everett with Massively OP, and you are watching another episode of Massively Opinionated, the show where we take the MMO tropes that you argue about in your guild chat and pit them against each other until one of them dies. Because we are the ultimate authority on everything MMO ever. This show, specifically this show. And I have brought with me two guests, and I'll explain what I'm doing with this show today because it's a very specific kind of show, very kind of special kind of show today. I have brought with me our Guild Wars 2 columnist, Tina Lauro from Massively OP. How's it going?
Ah, it's going good, going good.
Good. Are you ready to fight today? Because I think it's going to be quite a battle. Because
yes.
Yeah, because I've also brought with me Brendan Drain, our EVE online columnist. It's going to be a fight. We're gonna, right? We're gonna. Yeah.
Let's do this.
It's gonna be okay. So let me explain a little bit why I've brought these two on. Besides, their Irish accents, which and also clearly because of Brendan's dad sweater that he's wearing. I mean, that was one of the...
We've got Irish accents, amazing jumper, and Tina's like 4 foot tall.
Yeah. That's
what's not to like.
What more do you need in a show? That is really all you need for any show at all. But at any rate, why I brought these two on is because these two games that they represent have two extremely different styles of open world PvP, and both of them are both extraordinarily viable, extraordinarily popular with a certain crowd. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of take these tropes that that they have in the two different kinds of PvP and ask which one is better under which circumstances. So they've already said they're ready to go and ready to battle this out. So let's I guess we could just start with the first question here, and it's really kind of simple. The first question is World v. World, which is what Guild Wars 2 had, or RVR, which is kind of what it models after, or Total Open World PvP. And we'll go to Tina first on this one. Tina, obviously we know your answer. It's yes. World v. World. So why is it? Why is it World v. World? Why is that the most important?
What I like about World vs. World, and particularly how Guild Wars 2 uses it, is that it presents a great sense of safety for players. Everyone will already know by now that
Brendan's already shaking his head.
I know, I've said one sentence.
No, go for it. You're just making arguments against yours easier to come up with. Go on.
We'll see, Brendan, we'll see. What I like about it is that anybody can jump right in without the pressure that's associated with PvP. I know I am definitely not usually a PvP fan. It's well documented that I really don't like it, particularly if there's not a good lore reason for PvP. And it definitely makes it a lot easier because it takes off the pressure. I like that in Guild Wars 2, in World vs. World, you scale up to 80 no matter what level you are in the game. And that gives you the opportunity to, one, experience end-game stats before you actually ever get there. And two, it also equals off the playing field for nice fairness. which is definitely something that EVE Online lacks when it comes to PvP. I really like how you don't need to worry so much about your goals because the end result isn't ultimate destruction. And every, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, the whole tide can turn, but it's never going to totally ruin you. And that's what I like about world versus EVE's open world PvP.
Okay, well, Tina has presented her argument. Brendan, let's hear yours, and then you'll also get a chance to rebut as well. So
okay, so
go ahead.
The main thing I'd say is PvP is not about safety; it's about conflict. Fundamentally, it's about knocking someone's head in. Now, if you want safety, Guild Wars 2 has instance PvP matches. That's perfectly fine, and I'm not going to argue that Guild Wars 2 could be improved with a big open world thing, because that's not this question. But
I'm because of kidding.
Well, we'll get onto that later. But I mean, even EVE has your kind of low risk PvP. It has faction warfare. It's very easy to just dip your toe in there. They've got training corps that specifically are set up to fight each other. So you've got a lot of the same safety factors, and those are literally just opt-in systems. You can join this corp and you are in this pretend war, even schedule fights and stuff. But in answer to the question, I think a total open world PvP system is the best. And to clarify, I'm not really talking about just, what people call a gank box, well, what Bree calls a gank box, which is just a completely open world where everyone can kill each other and loot each other, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about it in the sense of like a big, essentially a shard. Well, EVE's the perfect example. Essentially, a big shardless server where, that has some really important effects on PvP that you can't get out of a sharded thing or out of instance matches or out of the microcosm that is world versus world. I think both of them, both world versus world and the total open world style, do provide the same kind of unscripted gameplay. You can take a group in, you can go in solo, all the same kinds of gameplay. But an open world PvP lends a lot more persistence to it. So, especially in a shardless game where basically there's literally one copy of every area in the game, and whatever you do can have an impact on the entire player base. And it's the kind of thing where if someone captures your space, your alliance's space in EVE, you can't just switch to another server where that didn't happen. If you're getting chased by pirates through LoSec, you can't just change to another instance and evade them or just turn off PvP, which you can do you can do that in Elite Dangerous, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the fact that you can't easily disengage from PvP is what makes it more poignant. It's what makes it more impactful on the world. The fact that it's essentially not optional. There are safer areas in the game, but in high sec, you can't get attacked unless someone can attack you, but the police will come and blow them up. There's consequences there, but there is no place apart from sitting in a station doing nothing where you are completely safe. I think it's important in terms of the impact on the game world that you be able to be forced into those situations, because that's where emergent gameplay comes from.
Okay, so then explain this to me, and this is kind of a rebut to Tina's situation. Why is this persistence and this impact on the entire server and those kinds of things? Why is that important to the MMO game space or MMO genre in general?
Well, I think it's because,
over what Guild Wars 2 offers, I should say.
But I think it's because PvP at its core is just replayable, unscripted gameplay, competitive or cooperative. It's meant to be it's almost has to be emergent, and I think if you have a persistence of for example, a persistence of equipment and characters and territory and all that stuff, that lends to a lot more emergent gameplay. And we've seen that with EVE Online. It has a lot more emergence than any other PvP.
Can you give an example of what that might look like?
So, I mean, for example, the situation I was talking about earlier with you're getting chased by pirates, that can unfold in 100 different ways. But if you're able to just disconnect, to just leave the game, and suddenly you're safe, then you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to get involved in any kind of emerging gameplay that can result. I mean, you could run into someone and they help you. You could run into someone and they decide to blow you up because they want to get in with that pirate corps, you know.
Okay.
Or there's a million different ways things can unfold, and if you can disengage from it, that can't happen. I think and the second thing obviously is that I think it's just more impactful because you actually have a lasting effect on the game world in some way.
Okay. So Tina,
Okay.
what are your thoughts regarding?
Now, what Brendan calls more impactful is absolutely fine for the hardcore and veteran EVE online player, but that's not really going to fly for people who are learning, and we see that with how many people play EVE and how many people drop off very, very early. People invest a lot into, you know, their ships and stuff like that, and it all just goes to ruin in open world PvP, and not a lot of players can hack that because they invest more in the ships than they do in their character, in their avatar. Whereas
can I argue about that?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I interject?
Go for it.
Gear in EVE, and I think this is a big misconception that always comes up. And you're right that new players to EVE do get this wrong.
Get turned off by that,
and they do get turned off by it, but it's a mistake. Gear in EVE is like it's like a sword in another game. It's a disposable. Well, not all games have destructible gear, but it's a disposable asset.
Yeah.
It's the same as durability costs when you die in any other game. Then.
Which my game doesn't really do.
you invest in your character. Your character's your permanent thing, and then the ships are just.
But that's not going to fly with a new player because they haven't invested in that character. They haven't sat and worked on their skills long enough to feel that sort of resonance with a character. They feel resonance with the ships, and they get blown up, and they don't like it. They don't like it, Brandon.
Well, that's the thing, because there are PvP corps that will take day one newbies and run them through all of that, and they have a brilliant time, and they by and large do get into the game as a result of it.
Well, no, by and large they do not. No, sticking power is an issue with EVE Online, and you cannot bypass that.
In general, yes, but people who do engage with training corps have a very high percentage retention.
But you actually have to engage those training corps. Whereas in
that's not a mechanical problem with the game.
You can just jump straight in. You don't need a guild. You don't need to be the end level of the game. You need to do nothing. It is an even playing field for you to experience with no pressure what PvP feels like in Guild Wars 2.
EVE has that. It's called faction warfare, and anyone can sign up for it, and anyone can dip their toes in and have a go, and it's completely,
but it's hardly as if open world PvP is just going to switch itself off in EVE Online. No, it never does.
This is the thing. I think EVE Online you can just leave it.
I need to be switching cameras back and forth like this. Keep going. Go ahead, Brendan.
Here's the thing. I think EVE does contain small scale kind of drop in, drop out PvP in the way that you're suggesting, specifically because players have set that up, and also because of faction warfare. But Guild Wars 2 doesn't contain proper faction versus faction PvP in the territorial sense, and that's something EVE has over it that it can't do.
Territory is a very, very compelling thing in EVE Online, but it's not something that exists as a great sort of overarching element across the whole of Guild Wars 2, so it's hardly as if that's a PvP issue for Guild Wars 2.
But it was in Guild Wars 1.
How the game really
in Guild Wars 1 you had had your guild halls and your guild wars, actual guild wars in Guild Wars.
Yeah. I mean, we are going to see that when Heart of Thorns hits as well. We will have our guild halls, and we'll have our little dueling area there and stuff like that. But that's not really how Guild Wars 2 does things. Physical space, or like physical space in a game sense isn't really what Guild Wars 2 is about. If
it had that persistence
that's okay.
of a universe, and each guild actually had a spot that its guild hall is in, and that's it.
But a game doesn't have to not be a theme park
No,
to have good PvP. I'm not going to buy that, like.
No, I'm not going to say that either. No, that's true. But I would say that EVE Online has better Guild Wars than Guild Wars 2, and that's a travesty. I think that just won me the point. Really?
Oh wow! Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna call it here, and I think that there is a few good things have been hit on by both sides. And like for instance, I mean the no pressure thing, that's huge because I mean I think Brendan would agree that there is a lot of pressure on players as they get into EVE, and the fact that Guild Wars 2 has no pressure. However, that being said, I think there's something to be said regarding what Brendan said regarding retention. Like for instance, because there's no pressure in Guild Wars 2, there's no pressure to leave. I mean, there's no pressure to stay as well.
No, the retention rates among people who do get into EVE Online are quite high.
So I'm going to for this particular thing with RVR versus straight open world PvP, I'm going to have to give the point to Brendan on that one because it really boils down to I think it boils down to that last part. Although no Guild Wars in Guild Wars 2, that was pretty good. I'll give you that was a good cut. But the idea behind that, the whole idea that there is ownership in what is in the open world, has a lot to do with what makes open world great, and that just at this point in time doesn't exactly exist in Guild Wars 2 because even the keeps that you own, you only own for a short period of time.
That's it.
All right, so that great fight there. So we'll move on to the next question, which is also deals with PvP as well, and this is kind of in. It kind of runs into a situation where a lot of people complain about. A lot of people complain about, what happens when your character dies, or that some people don't like the idea that there is no consequence for death because that doesn't really create an MMO, or other people are like, but I don't want to lose everything. So what I asked is which game has the best death penalty, and I'm going to throw this one over to Brendan first, and I think we know what the answer is. But
between Guild Wars 2 and EVE Online,
yes,
EVE Online.
Yeah.
This is the problem. I actually had this argument with Tina before.
Okay.
That Guild Wars 2 by definition, EVE Online has a better death penalty because Guild Wars 2 has no death penalty. It has virtually nothing. Literally, right? Literally, you lose some gear durability that you have to pay money to get back, which is virtually nothing.
You do not pay money.
Okay, you don't anymore. Yes, it's free now. So that's even better. So there's literally no death penalty there. Just you have to walk over to an anvil and click it, or a repaired guy and click it. The other thing is, what do you lose? You have to run back to the fight, in World versus World. And yeah, that's an inconvenience, but every game has that. That's the bog standard minimum. That's if you didn't have that, there wouldn't be any negative at all to death, because people could just jump straight back into battle again, and then we'd have Quake. So I think EVE Online, its death penalty creates meaningful PvP. And I'll say this because I have played a lot of PvP-based MMOs over the years, and I'll say some have had a lot better mechanics. I actually really liked the PvP servers in Age of Conan, for example. Really loved that. I was really into that, in Tortage at least. But no game has actually given me that kind of like adrenaline rush that you get from EVE PvP, and it's a legit thing. People get the shakes from EVE PvP, because there's something on the line, and it doesn't even have to be something big. I mean, you're literally talking. You've got a ship that is worth like 10 million or something, and you can get...
yeah, just 10 million.
Yeah, just 10 million.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
10 million's like
Not even big.
You make like 40 million an hour in the lowest paying profession, in the game. You can sit and grind
After
that 10
how
million
long
in
of skilling up
nothing.
there, Brenton?
No, newbies can do it too. I actually did an experiment once where I got
As an experienced player?
no, I got some friends into Eve, and I gave them advice.
You
And
see?
then,
Yeah.
well, this is the thing, I didn't even give them that much advice. I said to them, the best way to make money is go and kill rats, or you could grind missions, or you could try and find someone who's doing high level missions and tag along. And one of them figured out that, well, one of them got lucky as hell and got some rare gear, but one of them figured out that he could fly around where there's pirates and just warp in, nick the gear off their kills, and warp out before they got him. And he would just do this over and over again. And he made more money doing that than most people made doing missions. And like, there's a lot of opportunities there for that. But my point anyway is
Yeah,
it's
back to PvP.
more meaningful PvP because there's something on the line, even if it's a small thing. And even if your ships are disposable, you have 100 of them in the station, it still makes it like feel better when you get a kill as well, because you can value the kill that you just made. It means you can also collect stats. You can say things like, oh, people look at their ISK efficiency, how much have they killed in value versus lost in value.
ISK efficiency.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all the kill boards, they have the percentage and all, and people use this
His
to
spreadsheets.
totally spread. I'm not gonna be apologetic for spreadsheets.
Yeah.
But people do, like, they have wars where their goal is not necessarily to win the war, but to have really good ISK efficiency, so that they've inflicted a lot of losses. Just make it painful for the other guy to make ground in this war, and they will give up. And it's happened recently. It happened in the War for Providence. They did say that they had already it was just a test, and they were not really planning on taking over stuff, but they spent billions.
But tie that back to
Okay.
death mechanics. Now
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
a bit like...
Oh,
yeah.
right, totally. Okay, so the other thing is, obviously, you can put a real world value then on battles, which has been a big media piece over the years, which is a positive for the game. But for games that have games having a meaningful death penalty, I think EVE Online strikes a good balance if people are properly understand that they are not their ship. The ship's just a tool. It's a financial loss. It's not a real it's not permadeath, and that your character no longer loses skill points when you die as well. So that if your clone isn't covered, they've got rid of that. So there's literally your character is perfectly fine, perfectly safe. I think that's the optimum model. I think Crowfall is doing something similar with most of its campaign worlds.
Okay.
All right, so Tina, why is the lack of death penalty, or the minimal death penalty with Guild Wars 2, why is that one better?
Okay. I think you can't look at Guild Wars 2's death penalty without looking at its downed mechanics. And I think that is what makes PvP beautiful in Guild Wars 2. And that is why I enjoy it. What you need to consider with Guild Wars 2 is that it's not about financial cost or anything like that. There is strategic cost for dying, because obviously you're out of the fight for X amount of seconds while you respawn, then you have to run back. But your party can actively prevent that and can bring you back from the brink if they stick together as a tight-knit unit. And so it actually goes to make beautifully strategic PvP in which your party gel together so well to ultimately get success. I mean, Brendan runs PvP with me. He actually made me do PvP, in fact, and he can tell you how many times a win has came down to literally someone coming back from the brink because of good coordination, and the fight has been won in those last few seconds of someone coming back from being downed, and that makes it beautiful. I mean, I think in terms of EVE Online, a lot of the penalties that you might see on the surface are sort of buffered away from the player anyway, so I don't really know how important they are, because you have things like insurance, don't you? And I mean, now you don't have the skill drain and stuff like that. So, I mean, players are actually getting kind of cushioned now in EVE Online, so I don't know whether it's just quite as compelling as what you're making out.
Well, no, I would argue about that because essentially you can always just use more expensive gear or a more expensive ship for a particular role. So it boils down to how much do you personally want to risk on a fight, and you can get that like 5%.
But your risk is always going to be capped by what the other side's throwing at you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's hardly as if you can just personally scale up your risk to, you know, crazy stakes without the other side having something equally beefy to chuck your way to make it an actual risk.
Well, no, it does happen. I mean, when you think about it, you can choose to use a more expensive ship. Your entire fleet can choose. It tends to be now that an entire fleet will pick one particular ship and set up, and they'll all just fly that and just be a big brick. But you can choose to do that, and it happens.
So how is this? I mean, going back to the question, is the loss of gear? How is that compelling, or how is that not compelling? I guess that in both cases. So
for me, it's not compelling because of the buffers that the game puts, you know, to cushion you from that blow, because the game realizes it turns off new players and all the rest, and a lot of people, you know, sort of focus on the ship and not the character. So it has all these mechanics to buffer you and shield you from that loss. So to me, that definitely lessens how compelling that is as a mechanic.
I disagree, because I think the buffer is only a small amount. Like insurance, you pay 30% of the value of the ship, and you get roughly 100% of the value back when you die. So
that's pretty good.
It cuts it down by 70%, roughly.
Which is considerable, really.
You lose all your cargo. You lose half the modules on your ship are destroyed, and the other half are dropped as loot. And if you're using expensive stuff, that's quite a bit. But again, that's up to you how much you risk. But I had a point.
And also, I don't know whether that risk comes in to every PvP scenario, whereas in Guild Wars 2, your down mechanics they are a factor in absolutely every PvP scenario.
I think, no, honestly, the risk of loss is in every PvP scenario in EVE. It always plays a factor, and it's not the scale of that loss. It's just the fact that it's there, even if it's a small thing. I mean, people do get, you know, a big adrenaline rush from the PvP, even with a couple of ships on the line, even with a small something on the line. And I think you said something about the Guild Wars down mechanics.
Yes.
That makes very dynamic PvP, and, you know, things can change at a moment's notice.
It adds that strategy element.
It has a lot more strategy in that regard, because you still got logistic ships can pull people back from almost death. They can be in deep structure, flames coming out of their ships, and logistic ships can save them. So that's some brilliant stuff.
But that's not something that like every player can do for you, right? I mean, like that you need to specifically pick that role in PvP to be able to do that, right? Whereas any player can help me out if I'm on the floor in PvP.
But we're talking about versus world. So we're not talking about instance PvP where you've got a small
we're talking about
still
PvP
down
in
mechanics.
general.
There's still
there's
still down
if we're
mechanics.
Talking about world versus world, we have to compare it to the same scale of PvP in EVE Online, which is going to be corporations or a fleet of 5 or more. You know, you're going to have people in there specialized for particular roles.
You see, Guild Wars 2 doesn't have that scale. It's not really about that scale. It's about what those mechanics actually add to the game, and I really can't see where the EVE Online mechanics trump what those down mechanics do for Guild Wars 2 in terms of gelling teams together and encouraging that sort of strategic level of gameplay.
Well, I think I would get shouted at by a lot of EVE players if I didn't point out how much more strategic gameplay EVE actually has.
But I mean, you have tacticians and stuff in EVE Online, right? But all those people need to pre-prepare. They all need to know each other and all the rest. The down mechanics and death mechanics in Guild Wars 2 allow strangers to be able to do that just as effectively. That is so cool.
So hold on. I get where both of you guys are coming from, and I completely. But I am focus. The question is focusing on the death penalties and mechanics themselves, and so I'm gonna go ahead and make a call on this one, and I think because as an overall arcing, you know, as we discussed in the last question, as an overarching like PvP strategy and those kinds of things, we clearly have the advantage in EVE Online, and I think you've made that representation. So I don't think the EVE guys are going to yell at you for that. But in this particular case, I am going to have to give a point to Tina on that, because I think she's right in the sense that, and I think this was the pivotal point in the argument, is when she pointed out that EVE or CCP in restructuring the PvP mechanics made the penalties lesser and lesser, and not more and more. If the death penalties as they were more and more, if they like made them broader, then that would show that, oh, this is working. Whereas I don't think it is exactly.
Well,
so
they removed the parts that didn't make for meaningful strategic decisions and kept the ones that did.
Yeah.
So I mean I don't know if that's a negative.
They're removing more instead of adding more is basically in the broader scale, and I think that's where Tina hit it.
I think the main point that's in favor of Guild Wars 2 is probably just that, you know, people do get put off by EVE's death penalty. It has a reputation.
Yeah. It does.
I don't think you can get away from that.
All right, so let's go on to this.
This question.
What does this next question even mean? Explain that to me.
It's. I always throw a fun question in here, one that's just like, oh, okay, then let's go. Let's see what happens when we pit two things against each other. And these two things that I did is big spaceship or big dragon. And so, which one is the better? Is
this who would win in a fight?
Yeah, because
I'm pretty sure a spaceship can gank a dragon.
I don't know. I don't know. Let's have Tina go ahead. Let's see which one. Big spaceship or big dragon? Let's go.
Okay. So, let's just consider this. Okay. A spaceship can only be as powerful and scary as the limitations of the humans who built it. It can only reach a reasonable level of scary that we can actually fathom, predict, and create.
Well, okay, hold on. You're using a colloquialism there. What do you mean by scurry?
Huh?
Scariness.
Scary.
Oh, scary. I thought you meant scurry. Sorry. Oh my god.
That's our action.
Are you actually going to argue that dragons are infinitely terrifying?
Yes, dragons are infinitely terrifying.
No, the human mind can only comprehend so much terrification.
We cannot even fathom.
There's a fundamental limit to how scared you can be, and I'm pretty sure a giant spaceship would max that out.
No, I don't think so. Definitely not.
Well,
I would be way more scared if I saw a dragon, let me tell you. And also, ships are under human control. You can understand that. You can get your head around that, and a ship may not necessarily be that scary. If you see a dragon, oh please, you are going to run like hell. You're not going to wait to see who the crew is of that particular ship. No, you're just going to get out of there.
Okay. So is it time for my rebuttal?
Yes. Yeah, let's hear this. This is going to be great.
Hold on, I need to look something up.
What are you looking up? You should have pre-prepared.
Oh, no. Right, no, okay, I can't exactly find it offhand. But, right, even a cruiser in EVE, right? Even a cruiser can fit weapons that have a power usage of like 150 megawatts each.
Which is nothing compared to Dragon's Breath.
That is.
No, it's
Dragons
not.
are limited by organic systems. So they have
No, they're magic. They're not limited by organic systems.
Okay, so we're talking magic. Right, well, if your dragons are magic, my fucking spaceships can be...
No, they're not.
Even talking about.
They're
Right.
not. That isn't so not
Okay,
even a thing.
well, right, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that a Titan's Doomsday weapon could turn a dragon inside out.
And the dragon would already have it before it even gets a chance to, because it has to, like, do all sorts of, like, powering up, maneuvering, positioning, everything that a dragon doesn't have to do. Yeah, dragons could be that big too.
No, it can't.
Why not? Sure they could.
No, it can't. You wouldn't be able to breathe enough oxygen to keep their cells.
Dragons don't need to do anything like that. They're magic.
I think this is cheating.
I think this is cheating.
No, this is cheating. You can't just use magic to say I'm better than your thing.
Can you give an example of a dragon that is about the size of a moon?
Can you give an example of a dragon? Did you ever think you'd ask that on this?
I know. Can you give an example of a dragon the size of a moon?
Right.
Do you know what? It's really, really hard to sort of know how big the dragons are in Guild Wars 2 because you're that removed from them. But they're scary elder things that can cause whole planetary destruction. So that is scary enough for me.
I do think that there is a bit of context that we should probably have here that that might make the playing field a little bit more even. And if we look at this, okay, so if we look at look at the games themselves that are represented here, in terms of scale, comparatively, the when you're comparing what you can have as an individual versus versus the dragon, or you can have as an individual versus a giant spaceship or whatever. Now what are we looking at? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? As you as a player, because
I think here's the thing: in Eve, the average player doesn't get to pilot the biggest ships. They don't get a Titan.
Yeah,
you'd have to be part of like really high up in an alliance, because first you need territory to control to even build the thing.
Yeah,
and it costs like something like 60 billion just to get one in your hands, and they're primarily used as these big strategic weapons that can push entire fleets to through jump portals and things. But everyone in the alliance gets to see them, so I think they're better than dragons because they have a positive role to play. Players actually really look up to them for the Titan pilots. They're a really big strategic thing as well. They're actually like a real big core part of territorial warfare system.
That for me actually weakens them though. Every player of EVE Online gets to see and experience a ship, and the scariness and the awe factor is diminished by the fact that every single person gets to interact with that. Yeah. Whereas nobody in Guild Wars 2 controls a mofo dragon. I'm sorry. Mordor Marth is not under anyone's control, and that is always going to be awe-inspiring. When you see a dragon silhouette fly over your head, you go, ah! And
no, because when I see a dragon silhouette fly over my head, I think, oh, look, a scripted dragon flying over my head.
Whenever, if you see
a Titan in
Eve, and go, meh, that's just building blocks of a ship.
No, if you see a Titan in Eve, you know you've screwed up or he screwed up. And if you've screwed up, you're now in front of an enemy fleet that's about to
and if you see a dragon, you know you're
And
dead.
If he screwed up, then that's an opportunity. You could, like the guy who started one of the biggest fights of all time in Eve, the B-R fight, literally, he clicked the wrong button and jumped this Titan into the middle of an enemy fleet. He was meant to open a jump bridge to send his fleet into the fight, and he jumped in without any support. And then people started piling on, and before they knew it, like something like $300,000 worth of ships had just gone up in smoke. When you see a Titan in Eve, not every player gets to see one. But when
how cool it is. Like, when you say that many ships and that much cost could be destroyed that easily by the fickle whim of one person, that's ridiculous.
No,
That's
but
ridiculous. That doesn't have so much of an impact as
that had a
this
huge
limited
impact.
number of elder dragons.
Actually, no, that had a huge
to
impact. The entire
whole
markets,
lore of a game.
the markets
in
across
Guild
the
Wars 2.
game are reacted to that. The price of titanium shot way up. People stopped doing missions and started mining
Yeah, but
because
that's
it was
because of a
profitable.
cool economy, not because of the awe-inspiring nature of a spaceship. Let's be fair.
Well, no, it's because Titans are a massive industrial project. They're
yeah,
not,
because
they're
of
not
cool
just a
economy,
scary
not
ship.
because of how cool a ship is.
But they're built in this economy. It's like saying, it's like saying it wouldn't be cool to be able to hatch your own dragon. That would be awesome, if the game would allow you to do it, which it doesn't.
Yeah, because
at least...
dragons are that bloody cool. You could never have them do that.
It's not really cool if I can't have it.
Sure it is.
In EVE, at least,
It's
know
the
that
biggest
like
lore
the ultimate
driver of
end
Guild
goal.
Wars 2. You cannot go and say that a Titan is the biggest lore driver of EVE Online.
Probably not, but alliances are, and alliances have lots of Titans. And as one of the old devs used to say, "Can I swear?"
Sure. I'll bleep it out.
Okay. He used to say, people asked him, "What are Titans for?" And he said, "It's a big dick." It's
But I can
It's
play
just to
Guild
see
Wars
this
2 without the need of an EP, and thanks very much. And you would not have Guild Wars 2 without the backbone of those dragons.
I don't even know. I don't know how to judge this.
I don't think we have anything to compare here.
live.
This is a bit crazy. I think in terms of its importance to EVE as a game, Titans are more important to EVE.
No, dragons are more
Whereas
important
dragons
to Guild Wars
may
2.
be more important to the Guild Wars 2 lore.
Because without
That's
it,
not
there's
important to
nothing, there's
everyone.
no story. Sure it is. That is what drives every aspect of the gameplay in Guild Wars 2. You cannot play Guild Wars 2 without experiencing the lore. It's just not that kind of game.
Here's a question. Here's a question. Can you, as a player, as just the everyday player, I don't mean somebody that's necessarily, I mean somebody that doesn't necessarily know about the lore of either game. It's coming into the game kind of cold. Is it important for them within the gameplay to see a Titan? Is it important within the scope of the gameplay for them to see a dragon, and why?
It is absolutely important in Guild Wars 2 to have that awareness of the dragons, because that is the major threat that unifies in Guild Wars 2. When you have such diverse races, without that sort of compelling faction thing that, say, World of Warcraft would have, you need to have something that unifies and gels and combines all those people together. And that is the role that dragons take on. They take on that unifying sort of thing because everyone has to pit themselves against the forces of these elder dragons.
Okay, I think in terms of EVE Online, Titans play a really important role to new players and there's evidence for it. Because after big fights where there's like Titans are destroyed, and there have been like live streams of it, and people get to see what fights are like on the Alliance level, there's always a spike in subscriptions, and Alliances always recruit new players. So there's evidence there that it's intrinsically valuable to people to see Titans on the field and to see the combat on that level, on the Alliance level, and then to try and get into it. I think that's kind of the goal of those players from day one, is be one of those guys on the field with that Titan.
Is that because of the Titan, though, or is that because of the, oh my god, cool explosions factor?
Well, we're not necessarily talking about just Titans. We're talking about big spaceships. There's always a bigger spaceship that you want to be. You want to be the guy who's piloting this. You want to be the guy who's like on the front lines in this particular strategy.
That's the thing, though.
That's
you
a
do
real
get
driver
ownership
of people.
these things, and if every man can have ownership of these things, how special are they really?
But the everyman can't have ownership of the biggest things. And you can't, for example...
Anyone has the capacity to work up there and EVE Online. Anybody does.
No,
you can tell me how easy it is to make money and how easy it is to connect to the skills. So,
because super capitals require sovereignty to build. You need to be in a self-holding alliance to build. Now, technically, you could go on the grey market and try and get one yourself. But then you would go and you would get it blown up, because that is a bad idea. Having a Titan without having a supportive alliance behind it is nothing. you're just going to get blown up and be a funny news story.
It's okay. So this is
hard. Good luck, Larry.
So this argument, this is for me. This is what the argument boils down to. From what I can see from a player that is interested in the game, not necessarily the lore. This is kind of what I'm. So somebody that is interested in the game. I don't see a huge compelling argument for either case, to be honest. It seems because it seems to me that you can, if kind of shifting lore to the side, which there are a large chunk of players who really don't pay attention to that at all. I'm not, and I don't want, but I'm not saying that I'm one of those because I'm not. But there is a large chunk of players that shift that out to the side. I don't see a compelling reason that you actually need a dragon in there to, into Guild Wars 2, or ever see a dragon for that matter. You can play the game, you can get enjoyment out of it regardless. But the same can kind of be applied to Eve in the sense that unless you're a part of a huge corporation or something along that line, you're not ever going to see one. It's not really a compelling reason to actually experience, seeing a Titan or something, a monstrous sized ship. It happens whenever you get into large corporate versus corporate, corporation versus corporation battles and whatnot. So neither of the arguments are compelling as far as that's concerned. Then we do run into a situation with Eve where, and Brendan mentioned this, where when people see large battles with giant ships actually happening, there's a spike in subscriptions and whatnot, and people coming to the game or coming back to the game and that sort of thing. When you see a large dragon fight in Guild Wars 2, yeah, all right, we've seen that before. It's exactly the same as it was last time. So that gives a point to Eve.
No.
However, this is why I'm having a real tough time with it. Bringing lore back into the game, bringing lore back into your reasoning behind it. Clearly, the dragons are like integrated into every facet of what makes Guild Wars 2's lore compelling, whereas Titans, although massive and awesome, are just another ship.
But Titans are part of Eve's living history. There's
whatever.
No, hold on. I've got an argument.
Whatever. Assets that get destroyed or not.
No. Because there's actually Titan graveyards dotted throughout the game where big battles have happened, and they've preserved the Titan wreck there, and you can go and see on this date this big battle happened. There's one for the very first Titan ever built and destroyed, and there's a whole actual real story, not made up story about Titans and Eve.
Is that compelling though? Is that compelling?
No.
I don't think it's.
Well, I think
it's there. It's there.
On the articles that I've written about it say that it is compelling.
I get you. I get that, and I am totally in favor of that. However, I think as far as how interwoven it is with the Guild Wars 2 lore, I think in that specific case, it's going to have to go to Guild Wars 2. But there's still compelling arguments on either side, and so what I have to think about then is I have to get my mind out of the whole I absolutely love lore and the storytelling in a game, and try to put my mindset into, okay, what is another gamer going to look at when seeing it? And I'm going to have to go with Brendan on this because of the statement about the big dick. Because it kind of is. When you think about it, the MMO player is looking to fill up a bar That's their, their ultimate goal is to make their bar bigger than the other person's bar, and
No.
a Titan
And that's
is
a pretty big bar.
that's a pretty big bar to fill up. So
So it doesn't work that way though.
so anyway, yeah, big ships win. So oh man, that was.
I might win one.
That was fun.
Oh my god, I might
Yeah,
win this.
you're 2-1.
game.
You're
This
2
would
to
be my
1, Brendan.
first.
You're 2 to 1. So you're in position to win.
Oh yeah.
You're in position to win. So
All right.
the only I don't know how I'm going to do a tiebreaker question on this one. So all right. So the last question, which is always kind of a build your PvP, or excuse me, build your own MMO kind of thing. Obviously, we have 2 MMOs here that are already built for us. I have changed it up a little bit, and so what I've asked these guys to do is to use their game that they represent, EVE and Guild Wars 2, and take their suite of features that they have in their game and make the other person's game better. And I've asked for 3 major features that they can add to that. For instance, taking Brendan as an example, because I'm going to go to him first. Taking EVE Online's features, adding them to Guild Wars 2, and making Guild Wars 2 better. So, go ahead, Brendan.
Okay.
Take it away.
I got this.
Okay.
So, well, what I would want to do, like my ultimate goal here, is to have actual Guild Wars in Guild Wars. Okay. So, first feature would be guild territories. It doesn't need to be a persistent online world. It doesn't need to be shardless. Literally, if we're trying to adapt Guild Wars 2 as best we can, we would do the same as World vs. World. You've got your area. That's it, right? That's your area. Same as we currently have your current world.
Okay.
You set a time every week to be online, like say 2 hour gap or 3 hours that your guild is going to defend its territory, and schedule gets drawn up. It's automatically drawn up. You're drawn up against other guilds. There's a ranking system, all that stuff. All the nice things to put your guilds together. And for those 3 hours, they invade your world, and then at another time it flips, and you invade their world, etc., etc. Okay. Second feature. There'd be harvestable stuff inside your guild territories. So you do have the whole zone, harvestable stuff, but it's a closed system. Right now you can harvest stuff in Guild Wars 2, World vs. World, and it's just, you're just harvesting materials. It's just there. Sometimes there's a quest that involves it. I would have it as a closed system. You harvest stuff in there, and then you use that to build buildings and to build your siege equipment, instead of just buying it off a vendor. And to make gear. And the gear, then this is my third feature, is destructible gear and equipment. So your gear and equipment has to be physically located somewhere. It is you make it and it's sitting in a chest, and you have to equip your guys with it. Every time they die, they can respawn and have another set of gear sitting right there. You could even have it automatically, just use one up from the chest as a replacement for your piece of gear. That's fine. But then the goal is, if you capture someone else's buildings, you can steal all their stuff. And you can take their resources, you can take their any equipment that's there, and you would end up, the reason I think this would be so good is because you would end up getting politics forming over it. Even with those little 3 hour windows of being able to attack each other's stuff, people would form coalitions, because they'd see on this, on the roster, oh, we're coming up against a fight with these guys. Can we make a deal with them that we leave each other alone, because we need to build up our resources, because there's some bigger guy out there that if we get matched up with him, we're both screwed. And you could still have it being 3-way as well. And you could have people then make actual alliances with people, and then you get your stuff taken over, it's gone. Your buildings are gone, you're back to square one. Now, they don't get to keep your territory, but they do get to loot your territory at the end of the 3 hour period. They get everything that in the buildings that they captured. Okay. So that's my system.
That is a really cool feature set. My issue with it
win then.
is that I see it as very, very cool, for EVE players, I think it totally misses the mark for the Guild Wars 2 player base.
Okay.
Guild Wars 2 players have picked specifically to play Guild Wars 2 for a lack of those cutthroat competitive features. They opt to go with Guild Wars 2 because of the different outlook that ArenaNet has on what makes a compelling MMO. And I think all three of your features would break what Guild Wars 2 is at the core, and that would be a crime.
I don't think the guild territories would break it. I think right now we've got
It's
world
too
versus world,
cutthroat.
and I think it would be much better to have
Destructible
guild
stuff?
versus guild. You don't necessarily need destructible stuff to have guild versus guild PvP. That feature on its own doesn't detract anything. That's a definite addition. That's something that, you know, it would
But
be
you
great.
kind of need that to make that compelling. I don't see what else would make that just quite as compelling.
So you admit that it's compelling.
Totally, but not for Guild Wars 2. I mean, to be fair, like I've written articles that list those three features as really, really cool things, just not in my Guild Wars 2.
Okay.
Well, I think you can dial it. You can dial down essentially the risk or the loss or the cutthroatness of it as much as you want. All you need to do is make it so that it's easy to harvest stuff, and building your equipment doesn't take much.
Making those things destructible and things to be fought over and stuff like that would be an absolute travesty in Guild Wars 2.
Okay, so
anyway, getting on to my features.
Your three features. Your three features.
Yes.
How are you going to fix EVE Online? Because it's broke right now.
What I would do to fix EVE Online are actually quite general changes. I wouldn't change too much in terms of combat or specific mechanics. My changes are a little bit more general. So the first change I would do personally is I would put more racial diversity into EVE Online. It's one of these real bugbears of mine.
So hold on, let me clarify the question, because you might just a little bit here. It is taking and you might be on track. I just want to make sure that we are taking features from Guild Wars 2 and putting them into EVE Online.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've got that.
All right.
What I would do, what really bugs me about EVE is that you are in space, and every single group is human.
Oh, I got you.
Whereas
All right, I'm
when
with
you
you.
go and look at Guild Wars 2, you have so many different diverse creatures that go to make up a really, really rich world that has way more potential in terms of lore, and it has more potential in terms of justifying differences between those things. So the human groups in EVE are a great starting point, but why don't we see any aliens? Come on. It's in space, for God's sake. My second thing that I would do is I would add the magic that Guild Wars 2 has to EVE. And why I would do it...
This is just so your dragon can beat my spaceship, isn't
Well,
it?
yeah, there's that. There's totally that.
Right.
But no, why I would do it is because I think that could be the difference in EVE between people focusing on the ship and people focusing on your character, on your avatar. I think if you had that sort of, those magical properties imbued in your character as your method of refining and gaining skills, then you would see much more capacity for that character to be the deciding factor in PvP. Whereas right now, people just, don't really think about the character. They think just about the ships, and that's what causes a big drop-off in EVE Online. So I think that could potentially come along and fix that.
So you're saying you would put the skill and level system in instead of time waiting for your skills to train?
I would put things that are trainable, kind of similar to how the masteries work in Guild Wars 2. I would do something of like that. I would also have, those sort of unique skill sets that come directly from a character in Guild Wars 2. I would sort of apply that more so that your ship wasn't the only big thing, in terms of battles.
Abilities decoupled from the ship.
Yes, absolutely.
That's using them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the last thing I would do is I would take the very easy to interact with PvP story of Guild Wars 2, that kind of you know, personal story and seasons and things like that, and I would take that and I would implant that into Eve to give a focus for players who just get a little bit lost in the sandbox. I think that would grip a lot of newbie players who maybe haven't played something just quite so open before. I would make that seem a lot less daunting if you had some sort of progressive system like the personal story and seasons to play through.
I mean, Eve, it's not progressive, but Eve does have now a live events system.
I mean, it does.
Consistently, there are a lot of big story threads going on. Anyone can participate.
I think it could definitely benefit from something progressive where people, you know, sort of jump on to see what happens next, what comes next, and I think it would link people together a lot quicker in Eve if you had some sort of collective story that really pulled on you like that.
I would argue with some of the other points, though, that, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that one because I think Eve's new player experience has been proven not to be effective. So I think at this point, trying something that, I mean, I actually would quite like it if, for example, they had a system where new players could gain basic skill points by doing tasks until they had a certain, you know, they're like basically give the tutorial skills that you get, skill points that you get, so that you can catch up with a basic player. I think that'd be good. Some kind of story-based thing where you make choices, and that'd be nice. Might make a good article. Thanks. But the other thing, all the factions aren't human, so there's rogue drones that are an AI that
but most of them, the vast majority of the factions are just humans. Let's be fair.
This is the premise of the universe, that the universe that
only humans are cool enough. How arrogant is that?
No. It started with humans, and humans started exploring space, and then they found this wormhole, and they went through it, and they started colonizing, and then the wormhole collapses. So everything had to diverge from those humans. So you've got the Joe genetically modified humans. You've got.
How could there be nothing else there? If we have to believe in a universe where humans can go out into space and all this here is possible, and Eve does try to have that nice sci-fi, you know, kind of factual base, where, you know, these things are at least plausible. Like, if humans can do it, why aren't there any why aren't there more alien races and things like that? Like, it doesn't make a tenor of sense to me.
It's just a result of the Drake equation. You're not going to have you're not going to have another sentient species, spacefaring civilization within range of Eve. Eve is literally a tiny little pocket of stars. You're not going to have another one within that. The chances of that are like astronomical.
But why not? If there was a wormhole already open there, like why not? Why couldn't there be another one that leads to somewhere entirely different that someone else took? I mean, why?
That's an interesting question, because actually that's something that they're starting to do, because they've already said they're going to do new areas of space with completely new things, and they haven't hinted at aliens. I don't know if they'll go that route, but there's potential to do that, at least. Well,
yeah, and I think they're going to use that potential because I'm right, ultimately. I think it will spice things up.
The other one is, you said, abilities decoupled from ships, and I think that would just ruin Eve PvP, because ships fulfill specific roles. And you need to be able. A big part of PvP is being able to size up the enemy and know, in this ship I can take that, but I can't take that. So it's basically a big game of cat and mouse, knowing who your fleet can take and who they have to avoid. And I think if you had abilities abstracted from the ship, that would just throw far too much of a.
I think it could also add a great sense of the unknown and danger to every attack, so that you do feel like it's much more of a risk, and it might make it even spicier, in fact.
I think history, though, in Eve has shown that if people have unknowns in whether or not they can win a fight, they just won't enter it. So
then why was the risk such a big point earlier then, if people won't risk things that
they'll risk it, but they won't risk it unless they think they can win.
Yeah, and
it's a matter of that gap, though, between reality and what they think they can actually win is usually made up for with arrogance, underestimating the enemy, and making mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's Eve's basically Eve's PvP is a strategic game of capitalizing on other people's mistakes.
Okay, so what I would like to, I know you did a little bit of it, Tina, but can you knock down some of the specific reasons why certain, like the gear degradation and the ownership and the material stuff would, specifically, if you could take apart each one of them, why they're not going to work or why they would possibly work in Guild Wars 2?
So number one was the gear degradation, right? That was your first feature, Brendan? Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that was actually the third one, but yeah.
Okay. Well,
It doesn't matter.
Okay. So disposable gear would be a really bad idea in Guild Wars 2 because, first point, the gear stats aren't as vitally important in Guild Wars 2 as they are in comparable MMOs. So gear isn't a big deal so much anyway. So I don't think you need to even make that step.
Well, you could take stat gear stats out completely.
Only cause like an inconvenience rather than actually adding that risk factor that you're seeking. So that's why I don't think that would work. What was your other features?
Another part of that one was equipment. Like siege equipment, building that yourself instead of just buying it off a vendor.
I think that would
being
work.
destructible.
That would work if Guild Wars 2 had always on open world PvP, but Brenton, it doesn't, and I don't think it ever will. So in terms of jumping into world fee world or normal PvP, the current way we use siege weapons works because we can just take it with us, use it, dispose of it, and jump back out of our PvP and get ready for the next game. We don't need to worry about building and stuff like that.
That goes to my first point, where your guild territories have a set time each week, like a 3-hour window or whatever, where you are matched up with other guilds and can fight over them. That's your period per week. That's it.
For me, sounds great, but I think for the Guild Wars 2 audience, it's just not. And why I think it's not is because of the way it means that people need to dedicate that time to PvP first of all, because PvP is only one very small piece of the pie in Guild Wars 2, whereas it's a much larger chunk of what needs to happen in Eve to keep Eve compelling. So we need to keep PvP in that like little pie-sized chunk context. Also, I think that it would put people off using PvP as that sort of zone to explore endgame stats and stuff like that, which is what we can use PvP for right now because it scales us up.
You don't necessarily need to replace world versus world. You could have it both. This would be guild versus guild.
Okay, all right. Hold on. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a call here, and I think it's been broken down enough to where I can do this. All right, here we go. And so the reason why I asked Tina why I asked you to take apart each one of them is because he kind of did the same thing with yours, and so that made a good metric for me to make a decision regarding it. And the biggest compelling one for Tina, for your argument, was seasons. I think Brendan couldn't really make an argument against seasons, and honestly, that would be freaking amazing with Eve.
I think I actually argued for that.
Yeah.
Before I tore the other part.
Yeah.
Time.
So I think that is absolutely clear, and I think that I think the biggest thing though is for on Brendan's side that you couldn't really make arguments for, that I think that it kind of exists, and if we go back to the previous arguments that we've had, guild ownership I think would actually be a huge boon for some sort of ownership, and he did territorial ownership, and I think that that's perfectly viable given this, and I think that if you look at like Crowfall and games that are coming up in the future, you kind of see a little bit more of that, and I think that kind of compels the argument for guild ownership.
It would be nice to have Guild Wars in Guild Wars.
Yeah, Guild Wars in Guild Wars.
Would, but in a very set way, though, because Guild Wars 2 players really, I mean, they're not going to be the same people who play Crowfall.
Yeah,
I mean,
I have to say though, I think that there is a little bit of as far as the actual mechanics involved in the window of time, maybe that might not be quite on point as far as what Guild Wars 2.
It's not like drop in, drop out.
Right, yeah. Which isn't quite on point with what Guild Wars 2 players are looking for.
But you would be spending your week like doing stuff to build up your city.
But
yeah,
to
get it knocked down again.
But that being said, I think that adding to like gear degradation, because his all kind of melded together. His all worked towards a singular goal, which you know, it wasn't necessary that you had to do that. But I think that, however, I think that the arguments of races, the arguments of magic within Eve I think that he kind of argued those away, so that really only leaves you with one feature that kind of stands out, whereas his other features kind of, even though you chopped them down a little bit each one of them a little bit, I don't think you completely got rid of them. So I'm gonna have to give the point to Brendan, which means that, oh my goodness, Brendan won!
Brendan actually won!
So great. It was great arguments all around, and honestly,
that was really fun.
Yeah, that was really, really great. I really liked the third argument. That was amazing. So
I've got to be honest. Some of the ideas that you're pitching for Eve actually would really work.
Yeah.
I
mean, all my ideas
really
did have
big
a
blocks,
thing, by the way. They were all to improve the newbie experience, because that, to me, that's the only thing Eve does wrong. I actually really, really like Eve as a concept. I think.
Just people don't get into it.
Yeah, that's why I always bring up Eve as this like brilliant example of what I would like.
Mechanically, it's.
I think you're really close with the races. If Brendan hadn't brought up the fact that the other wormhole stuff maybe being in the future, I think that would have held a little bit more weight. I think
that makes my point, though, that they are actually going to do that, because that means I'm right.
Yes and no, because
we know that if at any time they decide that becomes a good idea, they can do it.
Yeah. So anyway,
themselves out from doing it. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was great, great having you guys. So I'm gonna as the prize for winning the internet today,
Yay.
Brendan, go ahead and plug what you're doing with Massively OP, what you're doing on your own, anything that you would like to throw out there. Go right ahead.
So you can find me on Twitter at Nyphur, NYPHUR. You find me on Massively OP, where I write the Eve Evolved column on Eve Online every 2 weeks, and I do the Not So Massively column on basically all online games that are totally not MMOs, but are big anyway, esports and the like.
Yep.
In my own time, you can find me on predestinationgame.com, developing a Space 4X game that is in early access right now, and it's going well.
All right. Tina, where can we see your stuff?
Of course, find me on Massively OP. You'll find me at the MMO Mechanics column, which actually talked about one of the previous Massively Opinionateds I did. So be sure to check that out this week if you like this show. You also find me doing the Guild Wars 2 column, FFC, and you'll also find me doing guild chat, and I'm always looking for submissions for that. Any guild drama that you have going on, let me know, and I will sort it out for you, because I'm awesome at doing that. And you'll also find me working on Predestination with Brendan.
All right, actually, let me go to this camera here. There we go. If you wanted to see more of my stuff, I write the Hyperspace Beacon as well as Tamriel Infinium on Massively OP, and you can follow me on Twitter at Shadow SHADDOE. I also do the comic, which comes out on Mondays, and this show this show, we have, let me tell you a little bit about what we do with this show and as far as Patreon is concerned. Not next time, which will be next week, but the time after that, I am going to have all Patreon submissions. If you would like your question answered, your argument argued here on Massively Opinionated, there are some perks that you can get on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/massivelyop, and you can learn about how you can get your question answered or argued here on this show, and also some other amazing perks, like, you know, what game is going to be played on our live stream and those kinds of things. So check that out over there. That also helps support this site as a whole. And my phone is going off. There we go. Anyway, so thanks a lot for tuning in, and follow us on Twitter at MassivelyOP, or on YouTube, Massively Overpowered, and of course MassivelyOverOP.com or MassivelyOverpowered.com. Check us out there. All of the great MMO news and anything you'd ever want to know about MMOs is found on that site. So thanks a lot for tuning in here. And also, again, I'd like to thank my two guests, Tina and Brendan. Thanks for coming on again. It was a lot of fun and great arguments. And we will see everybody next week, actually. So, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.